Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lance back again with another episode of a random podcast that has been started for the past couple of years. And today's subject is about community service. To start off with a brief background of the history of community service, um, then we'll go forward on how there can be further implementation of it and some other issues that there are today. And then we'll also talk about the best possible solution. So, community service has been around in the United States longer than you might realize. Community service has been around for over 200 years, and the first volunteer fire department was actually created in 1736 by Benjamin Franklin. But then, since then, for the next 200 years, more opportunities were put forward for individuals who wanted to dedicate more of their time toward people and people that needed help, and also for people that had to, of course. People that wanted to dedicate more time to it had some options that were nonprofit and volunteer based, of course. For example, the YMCA, or Feed My Starving Children, or even the Salvation Army. Salvation Army has been around for a long time as well. Community service has also been used as a punishment for over a little half a century, and one can be ordered by the court to partake in community service for minor offenses like misdemeanors and low profile crimes like vandalism or breaking curfew, or maybe even like a really, really small scratch on someone's car that was a complete accident. Um, but not only is it used as a punishment by court, it can also be used as a requirement for graduation from certain schools. So what that means is you would need to have a certain amount of hours to receive a diploma and be able to walk the stage. A quote from Health states, their lack of experience usually leads them to hold higher positions in the organization they are serving. This proves impressive to colleges looking for responsible, hardworking students to admit. Not that many schools have community service as a graduation requirement, though. But when schools have that requirement, they want to make sure that the student gets into a college that will use the experiences that are posted in the school transcript for any possible extracurriculars or certain classes that the student might want to take. It'll also open up a list of colleges willing to accept that student with community service on their record. Also, in the past and the present, volunteering is associated with a 27% higher chance of employment. Employers are also 82% more likely to choose a candidate with some volunteering experience, and then also 85% are more likely to overlook resume flaws when there is volunteer experience, as quoted by Waters. So, in a sense, schools are looking up for students and will also create a plausible reason to have that requirement for their future. Colleges will appreciate that. So, some issues today with community service can differ between whatever subject you're looking at. We could take a look at the justice system, we could take a look at mental health. We're going to look at both. So, looking at the justice system, convicts are given a set amount of service hours to be done within the next 1 to 3 weeks if it's a small enough amount. And then if there is also more than enough time to get that done in 3 weeks, for example, 100 hours, you would need about a month and a half to do that, which is fine. So during that time frame, individuals that have a requirement by that court order may develop a lack of motivation and then end up burning out halfway through the sentence and just end up choosing not to do it, and then they have to do jail time. Lack of motivation can be caused by stress, life changes, or underlying mental health conditions like adjustment disorder or depression. That was a quote from Skettle. With that statement from Skettle and a small amount of common sense, it can be determined that prison can be a pretty life-changing event, especially if it's someone's first time, too. Um, that could also cause stress and then lead to another source of a lack of motivation or burnout. Burnout is also a really big issue when it comes to getting stuff done, and you probably have experienced some burnout. Burnout's pretty harsh when it comes to getting stuff done. Um, I myself am a pretty big example of burnout. I put stuff off, but that's okay. Um, let's say, for example, you're working on this really large assignment. Let's say like it's a 25-page essay for your like English 103 college class, and then you have to have this 10, 20-page essay, and it has to be done within a week, and you haven't started it, and then you get started, you're halfway done with it, and then you just can't do it anymore. You're burned out, you're tired, you don't want to do it, and it's due the next day, right? That's a prime example of burnout. Sure, there was some procrastination, but you still burned out halfway through it. Then you can't just get your mind to it, and you want to sleep and you want to try and make it go away, but you know you can't. And then with that experience, you also find out that it really just does not work out for you like that. And then you end up passing your deadlines, and then it's just not a good time for you. So within this sort of window, we can see how it can lead to a higher chance of running out of time to fulfill a sentence that was given by a court. So, for example, if you have 100 hours and you have to get it done within a month and a half and you can't do it, then, well, okay, well, not necessarily like that. But if you burn out halfway through, you can't do it. So, burnout can come from a number of reasons. So it'd be some common issues and challenges for volunteering include I'm sorry, let me repeat that. The most common issues and challenges for volunteering will include being overworked, being undervalued, and stress. And that was a quote by um, that was a quote from Turnbull. Okay, so the two reasons will coexist typically because of stress, and stress is a really large factor when it comes to trying to live a normal life. And many individuals, excluding yourself and myself as well, have definitely experienced it, maybe trying to get some stuff done or just trying to talk to someone, right? You can get stressed talking to someone, you can be stressed working on an assignment. Um, Stress will have its benefits, but the thing is, too much is what you want to avoid. Some of the benefits of stress maybe the only may being able to like gather yourself enough so you can get a deadline met or an assignment done, or it can be so bad that you shut down completely and wasting resources because you froze and you couldn't get anything done. Let's use an example of writer's block. Writer's block can be a big example of stress. You get halfway through and you're overthinking it, and then you just can't do it. So what that'll do is it'll disable the writer to finish whatever the writer is working on. There is also a very unfortunate general stigma of stress, and typically you just suck it up and deal with it because that's the social standard. But the more we dive into mental health, um, we find more of a need for breaks and more time to get stuff done. So to further implement what we know to benefit other people, um, we can we can help recovering addicts or people that are unemployed or someone that might just need extra help. So that means community service can be used as a means for rehabilitation, which is great. You know, that's one of the best things that we can have is rehab. Rehab is such a great resource for people that just need help. So why don't we use community service to help, let's say, for example, some ex-drug addicts to cope with their desire to get their fix? It'll distract them. So, a quote from an anonymous individual states unemployment can also leave a recovering addict depressed with an alarming amount of time. This could be disastrous to the recovery effect. One positive action that could give them an opportunity to get out of the house is volunteering. Volunteering just a few hours a week can positively impact go to volunteer and then those who receive their assistance. So, what that means is, let's say, for example, you have this one individual and they're this they have this really bad addiction and it was absolutely terrible. Just think of whatever drug you can think of, right? And so they they get clean, but they're still recovering because they're just tired of dealing with it and they want to try and get better. But then they're unemployed because they don't have any way of getting a resume so that they can go forward and get put in a job. And so what that does, that gives them a really large amount of free time, and then doesn't really work out, and they could probably end up relapsing. And so volunteering would end up not having that issue when it comes to well, not necessarily having the issue, but what it does is it will distract them and give them more of a resource. So, for example, like I volunteer at a food pantry, and what it does is it gives you this community that you get to surround yourself around, and you get to meet these really great people, whether they're really nice or really mean, doesn't matter. They're people, and it's a social experience. And what it does is it gets your mind off of it, and that's a great thing. So, if mental health can be affected in a positive way, what are some other ways that we can further improve on it? So, there's already an option for nonviolent criminal offenders to be able to shorten their sentence using community service, but that really just depends on the judge and how the judge may view the issue at hand. So, could it be possible to reduce the entire sentence to only a quarter of what it is and increase the amount of time allotted so the deadline really isn't as close as it seems? So, like, um, they have to have a reasonable amount of time, right? You just can't say do 500 hours in a day. You can't do that. That's not possible. So a quote from McLean states, as long as the community service organization had no relation to the defendant, its crime conditions gave us a reason to, um, it gives us a lead to the nature and circumstances of the offense. So sentences involving excessive community service hours are not allowed, um, and must consummate with the crime and not exceed guidelines. Service requirements interfering with the defendant's ability to maintain a paying job and support the family is not allowed. The community service sentence must not involve any great deprivation of liberty than is reasonably necessary, and the completion of the time cannot be unreasonably short. The order must also allow the defendant enough time to complete all the ordered hours, take into consideration the defendant's other court-ordered obligations and work and other family responsibilities. And so with this, there can also be some wiggle room, right? So if you increase the amount of time to get all the hours done, that also leaves more time to spend with family or more time to get these hours done. But it'll also give you another chance to not burn out. It is okay to take breaks. It's okay to not feel overwhelmed. You're not supposed to feel overwhelmed. If we can make sure that they don't feel overwhelmed, that's great. Sometimes some things can come up in the defendant's life. For example, if there's a death in their family and they only have 5 days left and they have like maybe let's say 10 more hours left, and that's like 2 hours a day, right? And they have to go to a funeral, but then they're going to be 2 hours short. What's going to happen? I mean, they still have to, they should go to the funeral. They should be able to go to the funeral. But that wouldn't look good on that individual if they weren't going to that gathering, and then the family would also not really appreciate the court for not letting them go to that. So what that would mean is the best solution to be able to lengthen the time given as long as it's reasonable. And you don't want to give the defendant or the individual that needs community service more than enough time to do it because then they just won't do it. Typically, the shortest amount of time for community service requirements is 100 hours. And let's say, for example, their only free time is like on a Wednesday to get stuff done. They would need a lot more than just a month and a half to get that done. Because there could just be some other stuff that comes up, and you can't really expect to get 100 hours done in a month and a half with just Wednesdays. But that's the really short amount average. The general average is about 580 hours, and that would take you several months, at least 6, so typically almost a year. Doing 100 hours a week is not feasibly possible. Typically, sentences will last, depending on the amount of time you can get 100 hours done, and then 4.5 weeks. Well, you can get 100 hours done in 4.5 weeks, depending on your schedule, and then the court will also look at your schedule to make sure that you can actually do community service without coming up and not letting you get stuff done. the court wants to work with you, but they also want to make sure that your sentence gets fulfilled. But there are a list of crimes that you can find that will also easily apply to community service. Though you can't, hold on, let me rephrase this. So, going off sentencing, there are a list of crimes that you can find that will apply to community service. And community service is used to reduce jail time, though they're only for nonviolent crimes. So, what that means is a murderer just can't do community service to try and reduce a life sentence because that's not possible. That's not how that works. There can be accommodations put in place for mental health in patients, not patients, but inmates. Um, so what we could do with that is we could give that person maybe an extra 2 months to get those hours done. So if they have 500 hours in 6 months with a decent schedule, we just give them an extra 2 months. So if they have 500 hours, we can give them 8 months to make sure that they actually have the amount of time needed to reduce the chance of burnout and the lack of motivation. But this will also beg another question. Should the federal court system change the modern standard for sentencing for mental health? So that would include enough time to not only make sure that they aren't going to burn out or not feel motivated halfway through and not just get it done. The best solution for that would just be to petition to have courts meet the new cultural and clinical standard for mental health to help defendants cope with the fact that they not only have a new commitment that they have to fulfill, but a new problem that will definitely follow them for the rest of their life, which is, of course, their criminal record. So, with that, in conclusion, the lack of motivation and consistent burning out can only be faced if the courts decide to update their agenda when it comes to mental health of defendants that will stand before them. The constant burnouts can be fixed with more time to fulfill the sentence, and defendants will also have a better chance of achieving the satisfaction of finishing the requirement to lessen or completely remove jail time that was given to them. This way, all individuals who must take the stand may do so and feel more comfortable with the amount of time that they are given if they are given community service. And they will make sure that they don't feel like they're on this massive time crunch that makes them feel choked and they can't get anything done. Thank you for listening. This was Lance, and this was about community service and other implementations in society that could benefit new people going into the court system. All works and quotes will be posted in the description of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great night or morning or evening or whenever you listen to this. Thank you.